Our next session, Beauty of Sustainability, Retail and Brand Collaboration. Please welcome to the stage our moderator, Beauty and Wellness writer, Katie Becker, Brand President, Eva NYC, Annie Kolemainen, Senior Director of Sustainability Strategy, Ulta Beauty, Igharo, Director of Bansk Beauty, Eva NYC, Jamie Richards.
Hello, thank you for that welcome. My name's Katie Becker. I'm a beauty and wellness writer. I'm going to be moderating this discussion today with Eva NYC and Ulta Beauty. I have been reporting about beauty for about 15 years, working in magazines and for digital publications, and it's my job to sit down and meet with beauty brands all day. I've met with thousands of brands. And I can tell you that as much as you can imagine, sustainability and beauty have had kind of a hard time. There's not a ton of transparency, and these are two brands today that I feel are real exceptions to that and special exceptions to that. So today we're going to be talking about collaboration, the power of information sharing in the beauty space, especially between a beauty brand and a retailer. I would love everyone to share a little bit about their name, title, and what that title means.
Sure, thanks, Katie. Hi, I'm Annie Kolemainen, Brand President of Eva NYC. At Eva NYC, I lead and oversee the brand strategy as well as all end-to-end business operations. I've been with the brand for almost 5 years now, and I've always had a really strong focus on developing meaningful brand presence and partnerships. So I'm very proud that in the past year, Eva NYC was named one of the fastest growing mass hair care brands and was awarded Ulta Beauty's Conscious Beauty Brand of the Year.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Igharo. I'm the Senior Director of Sustainability at Ulta Beauty. I joined the company about 2.5 years ago to set our long-term strategy, to develop and execute our long-term strategy around environmental sustainability. And that includes working on our Conscious Beauty at Ulta Beauty, which is how we educate our guests and provide them transparency as they seek products that align with their personal wants, needs, and values.
Hi everyone, I am Jamie Richards. I am the Director of ESG, or Environment Social Governance, for Bansk Beauty. It's a hair care platform that sits in between private equity group Bansk and then the brands within the portfolio, which of course include Eva NYC, who I'm representing here today. I focus on technical sustainability. I've been working on these brands for the last 5 years, integrating sustainability throughout the entire value chain, which goes through everything from material acquisition of ingredients all the way down to our retail partners like Ulta.
Awesome. So I want to set a little context and talk about North Stars and sustainability for businesses in beauty. So we see a lot of talk around packaging, especially in ingredients. Sometimes I'll meet with brands where they're really focused on shipping weight, for example, but it always the targets tend to change, and what's important to brands tend to change. Annie, I want to ask, what's most important for a sustainable brand to be thinking about?
Wow. A lot of things, like you said, and I think it does continue to change and evolve, and so we have to change with it and with new information. But I'd say what's most important, at least from my lens, is really striking a balance with sustainability. Because at the end of the day, consumers want products that work and perform, especially in beauty. It's critical. So if there isn't a real consumer need, a real innovation, your product isn't going to be bought regardless of how sustainable it is. So I think that's probably the most important piece for me, is performance absolutely has to be there, and something that Eva NYC tries very hard in terms of striking that balance together. Consumers also, really believe that it's the brand's responsibility to develop and operate ethically, responsibly, sustainably, and whether that's happening or not is a whole nother story. So I think finding the right way to communicate, the work that we're doing and what's going to be most meaningful for the consumer is really important, and something that is challenging right now because of misinformation and changing priorities. I think in general in the mass space where Eva NYC sits, if you're at an Ulta, you have your own brand dedicated space and there's some signage there to help educate. But in other big box retailers, there's none of that. So there's really there's 3 sections and you're put into these siloed categories as a beauty brand of your performance salon inspired, you're eco and natural, or you have clean ingredients. And really, at Eva NYC, we're trying to bridge the gap and bring that all together. But we have to have partnerships to be able to break down those silos and really think about sustainability more holistically.
And Ame, for Ulta as a retailer, what's important in sustainability?
With Conscious Beauty, we try to help educate our guests, but also guide their experiences with brands that are at the forefront of clean ingredients, sustainable packaging, cruelty-free, vegan, and then we also highlight brands that give back to communities and the planet. And in doing that, what we really aim to do is provide really clear definitions for what we mean by each of those 5 pillars that we're presenting to our guests. So one example of that is with sustainable packaging. We've clearly defined that as packaging where a brand's total weight by assortment that they sell with us is recyclable, refillable, made with biosourced materials or recycled materials. That definition we created in partnership with our brand community. So when we were looking to create that definition, we went out to our brand community, we spoke to brands that we knew were on the journey of transitioning their packaging, but also others that we knew might have sustainable packaging targets to really understand what it took for them to make that transition. And it also helped highlight for us that there was an interest from the beauty consumer on understanding which products were taking this journey. And there was room for us as a retailer to help bring transparency and clarity to the space and help highlight and celebrate brands that were at the forefront of the work. And so, as a result, we've continued to really engage our brand community. We started Conscious Beauty with an advisory council of our brand partners. Internally, it's a collaboration with our merchandising and marketing teams, and we continue to have that two-way conversation. Eva NYC is one of our Conscious Beauty Brands of the Year. We always, for example, reach out to Jamie and some other brand partners to really help us as we continue to evolve the program and help guide the offerings that we continue to put in front of our guests.
Something that I'm always looking for are brands that are willing to help really educate me. A lot of my job sitting with brands is just digging through marketing and figuring out what's real and true. And it's unusual for a brand to have someone like Jamie on the team, and unusual for them to make them press-facing and someone that I can ask a bunch of questions to. And I've gotten to learn a lot about sustainability and beauty. And one of the sort of new filters I have when I'm speaking to brands is finding brands that don't live in a silo, that understand that they're part of, if they're gonna be sustainable and call themselves sustainable, they have to recognize that they're part of an ecosystem. And a lot of brands don't love to do that. They sort of live in their own zone. So I think there's going to be a shift of brands needing to, either working with Ulta or looking to leaders in the space. Jamie, I wanna know, what's the knowledge base that you need to do your job well? Is it very technical, or is it more like dreaming up out of the box solutions?
It's definitely a little bit of both. I am a technical scientist. When our brand says we're calculating our carbon emissions, we're doing that in-house. When we say we're looking at material analysis and the impacts of recycled plastic versus aluminum, we're doing all that in-house, and myself and my entire team is trained in sustainability metrics and technical sustainability. And I do think that's an extremely important skill to have in-house because it allows us to be able to adapt when our ecosystem changes. Not only is there going to be something new on the brand space, but the sustainability space itself is so evolving. And it's evolving very quickly that I think it's very valuable for someone to have an ESG expert on their team to react when the situation changes. But I can't do that myself. Mm-hmm. And that's really about being, again, part of that ecosystem and not a silo. I work with everyone in the company. I work with Annie, I work with our product development teams, I work with our logistics and supply chains, I work with our tier 4 and tier 5 suppliers because we need to, because they're part of not just our carbon footprint, but our climate shadow, what we're casting behind us and what we're also looking forward to, which is where we then engage our retail partners as well, like Ulta. And we start to build and deepen these partnerships so we can have not just our own ecosystem of change, but affect the entire ecosystem we're a part of to really start engaging that collective climate action.
What did you study in school, Jamie?
I'm going to say the official major because I think it sounds so ridiculous to tell people. I studied a major called environmental policy and decision making. And I'm sure when I told my parents that, who are actually in the audience today, they were like, all right. But no, they absolutely went for it. And the degree I actually studied focused on sustainability metrics. So again, doing those technical calculations, but also looking at the legal landscape. And then that decision-making piece is what are consumers actually looking at when they engage in the space. And so it's a really holistic study that I'm very grateful to have because I genuinely utilize it in my job every day.
Ame, can you tell me about the background that led you to this position at Ulta?
Yeah, I was an art major in undergrad, and when I first got out of school, I worked in beauty as a marketer, which I think really taught me a lot about strategy, analysis, and obviously allowed me to use some of my creative skills. Eventually, I went to grad school, studied sustainability, and prior to working at Ulta Beauty, I worked at an environmental NGO, Environmental Defense Fund, where I really, I think, got a great grounding in the technical and scientific side of this work. And I think, for those who do this work in this space, it's, you're always learning, you're a perpetual student, and that's how it goes.
Ame, can you tell me about how the Eva NYC and Ulta partnership came about, where the idea came from?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, our brand community really is at the heart of what we do with Conscious Beauty and Ulta Beauty, that and our guests' wants and needs. And so when Eva NYC, our merchandising team identified for us, Eva NYC is doing really great work. It's really grounded in science. I think you should pay attention to them. And so, they eventually were awarded Conscious Beauty Brand of the Year, and that's really where our partnership began. We started first by, as we evolve the program, we always go out to our brand community. We ask for their feedback and input, and that's where we started speaking with Jamie. Last year, as we were going through our science-based our process of getting our science-based targets approved, before we even set our targets, it became clear that emissions from the hair category were going to be critical for us to address. And so we went to some of our hair partners and asked questions about what work they were already doing in this space, and what was the challenge, what were the challenges, what were the barriers, and that really helped us decide to move forward with setting a target. And as we've now gotten deeper into this work around aerosols and hairsprays, and we're really beginning to understand some of the questions that we need to get answered, it really opened the door for us to do some research together with Jamie, and really start to think about how we can work together collaboratively to solve some of the challenges that are going to, and the innovation that's going to be needed for us to transition and reduce emissions from aerosol sprays and hair tools.
Annie, can you talk to me about the work that Eva NYC was doing, why you were doing it, what were you up to?
Totally. So for Eva NYC, sustainability has been core to the DNA of the brand from the beginning. So this isn't something that we've just started thinking about recently. Even though the brand is still very much up and coming, it has been around for more than a decade. And it's always been the goal of the brand to lead sustainability in the mass space. So naturally, in partnership with Ulta, when we heard from on the commercial side, what the brand was doing in terms of developing the Conscious Beauty program, we were thrilled. It really gave a voice and credibility to some of the work that we were doing and maybe not getting, credibility for. And it's not necessarily about getting the credibility, but having it be that communication on a larger platform.
Yeah.
As well as a meaningful framework for brands to follow. So it really helps, like Ulta Beauty has their pillars, we have our pillars. How do they align? How are we working together in order to achieve the goals? Because I think the reason we're all here is it's a collective action in order to really make impact. So we need each other to be able to do that. And it was so helpful for us to be able to say, these are our guardrails. We're committed to partnering with Ulta and having all pillars within the first year. And that's what we did. So we did some redesigning of some of our products, took a serious look at our packaging, what were we doing next, our people, the partnerships we had, and it really became this amazing conversation with our expert to be able to figure out what's next.
I want to get a little bit more specific on some of these innovations that you were working on. In particular, we were talking about aerosols. So one of Ulta's goals made it clear that they were going to need to focus on aerosols and how can we kind of move forward. Jamie, what kind of work were you guys doing around aerosols?
It was honestly a lot of research. When I was looking at the space of what is the impact of an aerosol, I found that most of the studies came from the 1970s, which I'm not calling old, but it's very old in science. And so the information was honestly just irrelevant at that point, and we realized that we needed to create a new baseline of understanding of what is the true impact of these products that we're carrying in our portfolio and that subsequently Ulta then carries in store. And so it started actually with a student group at Ohio State, where we had them really start to look at what is the emission impact of the propellant within an aerosol. And just like how you would work in the kitchen with a retailer developing a new product, we were able to work with Ulta as an in-the-kitchen sustainability project, which we've now been able to extend out to other projects as well that we're working on, which I find so exciting, and it's definitely one of my favorite aspects of work. And so when really looking at aerosols and what to do, sometimes it is just taking that first step of research and baseline and then really figuring out what is realistic within this space to then have, again, that emission reduction and greater impact in collective action.
So when you're setting those standards and creating goals, measuring those goals, how do you go about that process? And can you tell us, there might be a lot of people in the audience familiar with this acronym, I wasn't, SBTIs. Can you illuminate what those are as well?
Yes, SBTI is Science-Based Target Initiative. It's actually a certification process that you can go through to validate your science-based target for climate reductions and solutions. There's other organizations that you can go through in order to get your climate target verified, but SBTI is typically your industry standard at the moment, and actually what we went through in 2022. And so when then Ulta reached out asking about their SBTI, I was like, oh my gosh, I already do that. How can I support you, right? And how can we reach our goals together? Because in order to achieve my goal, Ulta has to achieve theirs and vice versa, which is really where you start to get that deeper partnership and that collaboration. We like to use the word co-opetition, which is collaborative competition, right? And it's really all about making that race to sustainability so you can start having, again, that greater impact.
And I think it's important to talk about certified goals because that's not something that I think consumers are necessarily aware of. And I do get the sense that for press and for consumers, that might be something they're going to become more interested in because we see lots of claims about we're going to do this by this date, but then where does the accountability come in? And I think people are ready for that conversation. Ame, for Ulta, can you talk to me about some of the big goals that you've been setting?
So we have two large goals. The first, as I mentioned earlier, was our science-based target, which we had validated last year. That target is for our scope 1 and 2. We're aiming to reduce emissions by 90% by 2030. And then it's a two-part scope 3 target. So the first part of it is we've committed that by 2027, 68% of our suppliers by emissions volume will have set their own science-based targets. And then the second part of that target, as I mentioned, is around aerosols and hair dryers. So it's that we're aiming in the consumer use category to reduce those emissions by 28% by 2030. In 2020, we actually set a packaging goal that aligns with the packaging, the standard that we have for our sustainable packaging pillar in Conscious Beauty at Ulta Beauty. So that is that by 2025, we're aiming for 50% of our assortment of products that we carry by weight at Ulta Beauty to be recyclable, refillable, made from biosourced materials and recycled materials. As you know, going through this, right, it really is in recognition of our brand community and the work that they've been doing. They had started always this journey before we even got involved, but it's been an opportunity for us to collaborate with them, learn from them, celebrate their work, educate our guests about the work our community is doing. But it's also been an opportunity for us to problem solve together, support our community along this journey. So one example of that is earlier this year, we did a sustainable packaging conversation with our community where we highlighted leaders like Jamie, and we gave them an opportunity to talk to our community about how to do this work. Key takeaway there was just get started. It might be hard, it might be difficult, but start small and just start. Another opportunity we've looked at, we recently launched in partnership with the Pack Collective, the beauty drop-off in all of our stores. This is an opportunity for us to take back packaging from our industry that isn't able to be curbside recycled. But what we're also excited about with that work and that partnership is Pack Collective is looking at the packaging as it comes back, and they're trying to understand what makes it not recyclable and sharing that with the brand community so they're able to better design for circularity, right? So again, that knowledge exchange, that knowledge transfer, it's critical to go beyond one brand or one company to think about how we share that knowledge that helps us all get stronger and better together. We also recently joined Supplier Locked, and that has been an opportunity where with other retailers, other beauty brands, we're helping to sponsor climate education for our brands and our suppliers. And really, it starts again with acknowledging that not everybody may be lucky enough to have a Jamie on their team or be lucky enough to know what this work is about, right? I think we have to sometimes get out of our bubble and realize that we've got to, if we're going to see this transition happen, we have to support and help build capacity and capability to do this work. And so for the brands that want to do it, they're able to enroll in this climate education program. They learn how to measure scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, how to set a target. There are offerings around abatement, and so we're really excited to see how that work is going to help our community continue to shift. But yeah, I think this is just, we're just getting started. To the best of our knowledge, we're setting goals that we think are challenging but achievable, and we're learning and adapting as we go.
And retailers like Ulta have a really powerful position. They're touching so many different brands. So not only as like another check of accountability for brands to look at their sustainability practices or lack thereof, but also for the information sharing. It's really, I think, powerful. I want to talk about another specific example of something that Eva NYC is doing that's really interesting to me, which is around packaging. I had written a story for Allure maybe 2 years ago about aluminum packaging. I was seeing so much aluminum packaging come my way, and it looks great on Instagram, and it had this place in sort of luxe beauty that was very enticing and came with the tagline, infinitely recyclable, which is, who doesn't want this? So I wanted to dig in, because there's always more to the story, and found that, of course, there's some caveats to this. And Eva NYC is actually switching away from aluminum, which stands out in the industry right now. I think that it's quite unusual, but I think we'll see more of it. It's just not really where the narrative is now, and I think it's a great example of leading by being honest. And Annie, I'd love for you to talk more about that decision.
Sure, thanks, Katie. I'm smiling as you're talking because I'm like, this is all just rings so true for me. It's been a journey, finding the right packaging for so many reasons, because it needs to be a holistic decision. We made the decision as a leader in sustainability to move into aluminum a couple of years ago, and found the ways to make it work with that promise of making beauty have less waste and be more circular, which is wonderful. But there's more to the story, and our journey has evolved as we learn more and as we've seen it go to market and the impact on the business. That has really created a different narrative for us that's informed our decision to change. So I think as we look at what was happening, it was really impacting almost every aspect of our business negatively, other than the benefits that we were getting from the recyclability. But even with the infinite recyclability, a consumer still has to recycle it. So it goes back to the beginning comment of, it's really that balance that you're striking of, it needs to be a product that consumers will use and love and enjoy to use. And there is a barrier to recyclability with complexity. So by putting things in aluminum cans, you have to have a pump. To recycle it, you have to take off the pump. Do consumers know that? I mean, we're trying to educate, right? But it's hard. Aluminum and plastic threads don't line up. It's harder to make sure it doesn't leak, and the performance is wonderful. So there were those aspects, but more than just that, it's being honest of what we can do, a brand our size, and have a true impact, and the impact on our P&L. Like, I'm gonna be real, I'm on the business side. Brand health is gonna help us grow. The procurement aspect of being able to get these cans. The soda guys out there have a monopoly on the recycled aluminum. So it continued to be a challenge for us across every area of business, even innovation. So we're being humble change agents, and we have worked very closely with our retail partners to be really transparent about the decisions that we've made and are making to change, and then worked with Jamie very closely in terms of what was going to be the best alternative for us. And we found, at the beginning, much to my dismay, certain plastics are, they may look better, but aren't going to be able to be recycled and have a second life. So doing that extra legwork of finding the best option in terms of using post-consumer recycled plastic from the beginning, continuing to increase that amount as it becomes available, making sure the plastic we're choosing is very easy to recycle. So now with this new packaging, there's no barrier. You can take the bottle, you can throw it in the bin with the cap on. And it will have a second life because it's been designed that way. So we're able to increase consumer value with the change that we're making. We're able to make some really amazing innovations just due to the broader availability of what we can do. And the experience is going to be so much better. So it's been a journey.
I did get to preview those bottles today. Jamie, for the sake of my own endless curiosity and the nature of this event, can you go even deeper into the subject of aluminum?
Absolutely.
And why you made this decision?
Yes. So when we look at aluminum, as Annie and Katie yourself, you mentioned, infinitely recyclable, right? It's enticing. But when we look at the reality of aluminum, to actually have a low impact material, you need recycled aluminum. And in the beauty game, that's really hard to get your hands on, as Annie mentioned. You need upwards of 85+% of recycled aluminum to actually equate the impact of something like a 50% PCR package, which we will be sourcing now. And to figure this out, we did a lot of internal data work. We did LCAs, or life cycle analysis, which really looks at the full life cycle from material acquisition to end of life of these different packaging units. And time again, we just could not get the materials in order to make this business decision make sense. So decision made by the brand was to change. And so when really taking a look at that deeper impact of aluminum, we were like, well, what makes it bad, right? So for all of you, what makes a virgin aluminum problematic? And it really has to do with that beginning process. When you're taking aluminum out of the earth, it's a really invasive process. It's called strip mining. You literally peel the first layer of the earth away, and it's so hard to put the environment back to what it was. In fact, it's actually impossible to do so. And when we actually look at how do you make aluminum, it's a really water-intensive and energy-intensive process as well. Raw aluminum doesn't exist naturally in the environment. It actually exists as another material called bauxite, and you have to literally separate it apart in order to get your aluminum. And although we look at something like plastic, which you're like, oh my gosh, that's fossil fuel derived, looking at that comparative process is still so much less carbon intensive compared to this aluminum process. And when we put something like PCR, again, that post-consumer recycled plastic, in the mix, it actually just takes that impact even lower. And when we really take a look at sustainable business overall, as Annie's been mentioning this entire time, you have to have that balance between business and sustainability, and this new packaging is really where the two of them meet together. This will keep the brand sustainable and our environment at the moment sustainable as well.
And I imagine by the time I submitted that article to Allure, I was like, I could rewrite. It seems like it's changing really quickly. It's kind of almost hard to pin down, but it's been cool to see you guys as a brand make a decision to make that change. Ame, one subject I want to talk about is kind of getting out of the weeds of these technicalities and the things that the consumers will probably never necessarily engage in, and talk about what is happening face to face, because Ulta is where the point of transaction is happening. Like, products are getting bought or they're not.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about what Ulta has come to learn in terms of sustainability messaging?
So one, I really have to give credit to our marketing partners, and this is why this work is so critical to do in partnership with other functional teams internally. It starts first with transparency. It's very clear to us that guests want to understand how you're defining this. They know that different retailers define it differently, so we started first by doing our best to be very clear about how we define each of our pillars in conscious beauty at Ulta Beauty. Obviously, as Annie mentioned, you want a great functional product, but there are guests for whom the values and attributes really matter. And so how do you, bringing that to them has to be done in a way that's simple. And our marketing team really leads with how do we put this out in the language in which the guest discusses it? So it's not the sustainability team language, it's the language our guests really speak about these topics to each other, to their friends, to their family. I think what's also been really interesting is we've begun to see, I think, studies that are now looking at the actual purchasing behavior, like the recent McKinsey-Nielsen IQ study, is, I think, some great insights that came out of that was, one, I think the more a brand can make some of these more difficult to make claims, like vegan or climate-related claims, the more you're going to see the benefits of that. But also, again, as Annie spoke about, trying to really do the work of addressing the variety of issues that fall under the sustainability umbrella, the more a brand is able to make more claims and authentically, right? The more you're also going to see the benefit of that. But I think really the biggest takeaway for me from that study was the fact that this space is evolving and the consumer has evolved. And so now it's not just making a claim that any category can make. You really have to understand what are the claims that matter to the product category that you're selling and to the consumer that you're serving to really ensure that you're having a conversation that actually lands, which is really critical.
Annie, I would love to wrap up our conversation by talking about what's coming up for the brand, what you're excited about. This is obviously a brand that's leading in terms of sustainable practices in the beauty business. What do you see on the horizon that you can share with us?
Sure. There's always a lot going on, right? It's always new information. And I think we're seeing one thing we haven't talked a lot about, that we're seeing the importance of ingredients really come to the forefront of mass beauty as well. And somewhere that the consumer, like Ame has been talking about, like what they care about is continuing to change. And the responsibility of the brand is to operate and develop. And so that even the recyclability, the consumer is telling us, no, that's your job. But what I'm going to buy is going to be, with the best ingredients. Are they responsibly sourced? So there's questions that are coming up, and that's the fun work that then we're able to say, what are we going to innovate with? How can we make sure that we're communicating this in a digestible way? So it comes back to, again, what we're doing at retail and what brands are doing. We're on the same mission. And so we've worked really hard to establish, with Jamie's help, of course, how we can bring that to light in a better way, and continue to inspire other brands to do that. I think in general, the beauty space is a little behind. We were all talking about this, and so I think it's exciting just to be here and be talking about it and sharing our information, and putting it out there. We're here to help. Our retailers want to help, and I think that's really exciting. And a pivot in this space is we'll share what we're doing and see if that helps you. From a business perspective, for us, like I'd say, owning the responsibility is the first and foremost. Building a roadmap together, whether you have an ESG partner, which if you don't, best investment you can probably make because it's a full-time job. But developing that roadmap of what are the goals that you want to make, aligning them across the business so they become priorities, and then setting that strategy out. And so for us, not too dissimilar to Ulta, it's all about powerful partnerships, maximizing our materials, responsible ingredients, like I mentioned, and then supply chain optimization. And we just published this week our sustainability report. Brands can find it, use it, see what we're doing, and I hope there's a lot more of that collaboration to come.
Where can they find that report?
On our website.
Okay, great. Which is?
Eva NYC.
Okay. We had set aside time for questions, but I'm not sure if we have a microphone to take questions. Or if anybody can tell me that. Okay, with that in mind, I'm going to have one last question for Jamie because I can't help myself. One thing that we talked about is something called regenerative ag. Tell me what this is, and should I be seeing more of it in the future? Get me ready.
To me, it's a really pure sense of sustainability when we look at something like regenerative ag. And you will mostly hear food talk about it, but what we're trying to do is bring it to beauty. And there are some beauty brands that are dabbling this right now, but the way we're working on this is we're taking it even deeper. Right now, we're in the process of actually working with an organization called Forested, who are on the ground in East Africa, building out supply chains for ingredients that already exist in our portfolio. Shea, baobab, moringa, lavender, vanilla, really anything you want, sky's the limit, because you can grow them coinciding. And the most important part when we look at something like regenerative ag, because as we probably have heard today, it's defined in a lot of different ways, is what we're really looking at is a people connection, properly treating collectives, fair trade wages, living wages, making sure that the money is actually circulating in the actual community. I like to call that circularity of the dollar. Is it actually is it staying with the collective that you're actually working with and the community itself? And then even looking past that and saying, okay, are we treating the land right? Is it being conserved? You're not over harvesting, and really being able to not just have the environment, but have the community thrive as well. Where we're taking it to the next step is that carbon removal. This specific process removes a lot of carbon out of the environment. It's called carbon sequestration. And we're actually accrediting the land to figure out that value. And what's so interesting about this piece and this impact unit that we're creating around this ingredient is that it will actually travel throughout our entire supply chain. And it's removing so much more carbon than our business needs. And so we're actually able to extend that to other partners down our value chain so we can really share that collective impact again and start to have them start thinking about what is their climate impact, but more importantly, what is your climate shadow? Again, that idea of what are you casting behind you? And by investing in regenerative ag, it allows us to have transparency, responsibly source, but also, again, just connect our partners all the way down that value chain to deliver you an actually authentic sustainability strategy.
Awesome. Thank you. And what was the group you said you're partnering with for that?
They're called Forested. It's forest with an ED.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for indulging in all my questions, and thanks everybody here for attending and listening to all of this. Hopefully we'll have more beauty here in the future. And thank you.